You're live.
Thank you, Mrs. DeGrasse. Welcome those of you online and those in the audience to our budget and fee hearing for 2025. And we'll go ahead and call this hearing to order.
Me to take it away, or do you want to take it away?
No.
I think, thank you, board, for taking the time to be here. Everyone's busy with their lives, but so the joy of an exciting part as being a board when we get to review the budgets. In years past, I've had a presentation that talk about budgets, and I think one of the main things as I'm discussing all of this, budgets are plans, their goals, their proposals. It's not actual. And so when we look at this, there's a couple of things that we do as we build budgets to help us safely and conservatively maintain money from year to year. And so there's a balance between where you're conservative and where you estimate high. So with like revenues, we want to be as exact as we can on the revenue coming in, but there are times that it changes. Sometimes we get more revenue, occasionally we get less, but we want to be conservative that where we estimate that we're going to at least get that much revenue. When we look at our expenditures in a budget, and especially in a budget this big and with so many moving pieces, we estimate high on our expenditures. So when we're looking at our initial carryovers, one way to from one year to another, they're going to be off, and not when I say off, they're not going to be exact numbers. So it's not like somebody came here and gave me, here is your $100, now budget it for the year and tell me exactly how you're going to hit that, because it might change from $100 to $150 during the year. And so if I'm looking at that and saying, okay, if I only have $100 to work with, and I'm looking at all my expenses, I want to make sure that I am at least not going over 100 for sure, but I want to have things in place for rainy days. And so I think even when I start going through budgets, there's times when I'm talking about exact details that my mind already switches back over to like a bank reconciliation. And this is not a bank reconciliation. This is a budget. So comments on that from the board, because I think that's something we've discussed in years past, so it's been 5 years.
Seems like a big change in the balance for what you,
In which one?
in the very
Well,
top number.
let's talk about that, because it is a big change. It is a big change, and there's reasons for those.
Will you open
And so the 2-year summary.
the amended?
So when we look at balance forward,
So on this first column is the current budget that you have approved for the 24-25 school
so
year.
that was last year.
That number was me estimating how much we would have left after all of our expenses for fiscal year 24.
So if you reverse to 12 months ago with us coming off everything from the legislative session, everything else, that was our best guess on where we would be at. And so when you look at the
$300,000.
Because the second column, that number at the top is an actual number.
so when you look at that 1.2,
Yeah, I realize that.
that is so if we were going to estimate, I guess there's 2 ways you could look at that. I'm glad it was up by 300,000 instead of down by 300,000. So let's like that's the main thing that we look at. So, but it's fair to say, what could you do to make that number more consistent? And I think part of that is a fair thing of
Is it just being skittish or?
Well,
there's a couple of different things on that. One is with the budget programs and in our progress as superintendent and business manager, we are hopefully getting better in this process year in and year out. The hope is that we'd be able to get that a little bit closer. But I don't want to come in here and say, I want to nail that exactly and be exact, because if you go down a little bit below, like that's worse. we wanna make sure that we are,
Not easy.
So when I make my amended budget,
Yeah.
I am guessing how much more money is going to be spent. So
So
this is in May. I'm guessing how much will be spent through the rest of June, plus any expenses from July and August that will be moved back into
yeah,
that fiscal year, because all of my contracts are paid over 12 months, September to August, but my fiscal year ends at the end of June. And so percentage wise, this is actually really close, is what the auditors have told us. Is that because we're being conservative and estimating higher, then I'm not coming in with a bunch of findings during my audit to say that I didn't budget enough.
so we look at that, the current budget year from last year, that was our best plan. The amended budget is us basically shoring up that, the differences. And we don't get that number that I highlighted until September after the audit. So when the audit's finalized, they give us, this is where it was at. Now, one of the reasons why I think this one was a little bit higher, we were still finishing up the ESSER spending and everything else. ESSER spending is completely fallen off. The other thing that we have is our bond money is going to fall off. And so it really just depends on the different revenue sources and how they adjust. But I think that's a really good question, because somebody could ask, well, why is that? Does that mean that you guys just are throwing out numbers and not being exact? We're trying to be exact, but we're also trying to be cautious. And I think we'll get better as we go forward on that.
What's your transfers in, Shane?
The transfer in,
That
Right.
is our ESSER funds. So I purchased in June of 24 our math curriculum for the elementary. The revenue or the reimbursement for that did not come in until July or August. And so because it fell in 2 different fiscal years, I needed to move it from my ESSER back into my M&O so that it wasn't just this money that's sitting in ESSER that actually doesn't belong in there anymore.
so what other things, Carrie, when you looked at the amended budget, you think would be a highlight for the board to look at the?
One thing that is going to be higher throughout our amended and our proposed
Or
is
next-
our,
Proposed for next,
for next year, is our increase in our interest in investments.
which is going to be a revenue.
A revenue, that interest is gonna be higher. Our,
You're going with 260,000.
right, for next year. And the reason that is we're already close to 200,000 for this year. And we are going to have 68,000 come in from our CD when it matures in August. And so I'm working to estimate where the market's gonna go. Salaries increase this year, moving forward for next year's proposed. But our discretionary did not increase, although our health insurance allotment did.
So should I pull up the 2-year summary?
Yeah, go ahead and pull that one up, because
And-
that will be easier.
So on the 2-year summary, this will kind of give us a view, and again, as we're putting these numbers in, because the budget's moved, there's a couple of them that don't completely match up. But again, the 1.2, that one's an actual number. And that's from our amended budget that we talked about.
Also, on the other, all other funds, the amended budget, the 2.097.
I have a copy of that.
I can get you one. I'll get Julie to print me one up.
So we shrunk this down just to look at like what we're currently doing. just because there's been so many different moving budgets, and on this program, the numbers don't always carry over exactly, and then we have to go search for all of them in the audit one, so we just wanted to make sure that when we're looking at the amended budget number, last year, at this time, we thought we were gonna have a carryover, well, that it would have been a carryover of 918, but it was actually a carryover of 1.2. A lot of that was ESSER spending, that's where it went through. The local tax revenue, this one, is our supplemental levy and our plant facility. It went, I don't know why it went up as much as it did, or whether we just didn't have it in the right way last time. Carrie talked about those other sources as well. Then looking at the end of this year, we're looking right around 850,000 to be our carryover. Now, again, it's still, even though we're amending it now, we still have another 2.5 months that things fluctuate. And it's still a budget where some of the things that we've estimated were high. So this number we're thinking should come in higher than 850, but this is a worst case scenario if every dollar in that budget was spent. So when we took that 850, it should have been 850 here, but we were playing with a few different scenarios. That's why it's 869 up here instead of 850. So that would be our budget for next year. We're looking at having 685 be the local tax revenue. That's bonded, that's gonna be plant facility and,
Not plant facility, that is only,
oh, excuse me,
um, it's supplemental levy and another one. I can't remember what.
does that count as some of the 521 money? Yeah, so it's kind of, it appears to be more, but it comes through as a tax.
Well, the other thing in our local tax revenue is how many people have paid their taxes late. And so the number that comes in is not the actual $360,000 that I'm levying for.
So there's multiple things in that.
I typically will get 4 years worth of taxes that come through. So when I get my tax check from the county, it'll say you got this much from 2021, you got this much from 22, this much from 24, and this much from 25. And so because I don't always have full taxes coming in each year, then that number fluctuates.
And on this, Carrie, we might have had that on the wrong line. Should that have been state revenue down one?
Yes, it should have.
Yeah,
I
that
apologize on that one.
just got entered into the wrong line.
Yes.
So that would be the state revenue coming in, and that's where it goes to salaries and benefits for a majority of that. And so as we're looking at our proposed budget for next year, we are anticipating, again, a carryover at worst case scenario of every single dollar in the budget is spent, we would have a $716,000 carryover next year. And so as we've visited with the board, we are shooting for that 800,000 mark. And so we've talked with it, and that's what our budgets are showing right now, that we are doing that in both of those.
Would you go back to that one for just a minute?
Yeah.
Yes, so that's in the all other funds. That actually was what I was gonna talk about. If
Yeah.
you scroll down, Mr. Williams, to the bottom of that,
Right here.
that's why there's a difference.
I'm gonna walk over here.
Yeah. We have this 5.1 million for this year, and we're gonna have the 4.9. We've already had about 50% of the football field come out
For this fiscal.
for this fiscal year, and so this is where we're estimating. But this includes all my federal funds, all my local funds, my plant facility.
Let's go to the plant, let's pull up the budget, so that'd be the proposed for next year that will show what it looks like on plant facility, right, through all that.
Yes.
So let's go to that, Tyson, because, so Madam Chair, we're kind of talking about 1 and 2 a little bit together, because I don't think you can have one without the other. So, and that's gonna be.
It's almost at the bottom. It's 420.
this would be the one that you're asking about, Tyson. When we're thinking about, okay, cost of the football field and what is this going to do to everything in with this? So Carrie, you wanna,
Okay,
Right.
so
it's actually down further.
which one are you in? No, go up. Which
This is the proposed for next year,
proposed for next year?
the amended and then the proposed 25-26
perfect.
on this side.
So at the bottom of our 24-20, so we started the year with 603. That's an actual number
And that's the carryover from last year, so.
from last year's plan.
And that was built up because we were able to utilize a lot of the ESSER funds to take that place. And so we had a healthy carryover in plant facility last year.
If you'll scroll down. Right here, we have the 305 that came out of our plant. The other portion that we've already paid to them came out of our bond.
So we just show this part right here. So these two areas here, these would be the expenditures that we're planning or out of plant facility.
For this year.
For this year. And then this line is what we're thinking out of plant facility for next year. And so you can see that some of the expenditures that we've budgeted lower on some as we went in and looked at some of the projects that were done last year that came out of this. We don't anticipate those same projects being done, so we've lessened those different areas. When you look at the board approved capital objects,
We
that,
did have a bus budgeted originally, but we're not going to receive it until next
Next
fiscal year. So I removed that expense from here and moved it into next year.
that's where that's at. So we've already paid for a portion of the football field here, and the other
That's the
portion
remainder.
is gonna be here. The track portion came out of a different area.
No, so we have our safety portion
From,
and track portion, a portion of the track and safety that came out of bond.
correct, yep. Yeah,
So-
that was it.
So then, but some of the track is in, it's just.
Yeah.
But
So
this
that's-
is the remainder of, an estimate of the remainder of how much we owe on the football field. So after all of these, our football field and our bus, let's scroll down, oh, it doesn't say what my end, it's gonna be
So what,
like 180,
no, it's
no,
125.
125, our
So,
carryover at the end
so
of
the
this.
carryover, before we had the facility money and before we had the bond, the goal with plant facility was to maintain 200,000. That's what we were hoping to have was 200,000 carryover. And that was like, well, the boiler goes out, we need something in there. We are still gonna have about 100,000 carryover every single year, even with these big projects.
Will you scroll down to the bottom, please?
Is it not?
No, right there.
So that's where.
137,000 is the carryover.
Yeah, but you still got the money from the.
Yeah.
No, what was it?
Facility, the school modernization funds.
Yes, where's,
So that's in 436, Mr. Williams.
On supplies here.
Oh, that's a good question. So Tannis's question is why are we on supplies going from 22 to 50,000? This is one of the consequences of school modernization fund. We used to pay for custodial supplies out of the maintenance, out of lottery funds,
Which came into our M and O.
which came right into the M and O. And so they used to have the lottery funds and the maintenance match, which was about $90,000 for us, and we would take that. But what happened is that 90,000 got moved into school modernization, and then school modernization has strings attached to it that you can only do capital projects. So now we have to find another place.
I have about 32,000 of supplies for custodial and maintenance that came out of my discretionary funds this year. And so by moving this up, it should allow us to have that full amount budgeted in here.
And we're gonna wanna track those things more accurately this year. Last year with the transition from one maintenance person to another maintenance person, we are finding that things are being reported differently now, and we feel like this is gonna be more accurate for us in reporting.
One of our goals this next year is to rename our fund accounts to make it more clear
'Cause
what it is we're
this
spending
isn't-
out of that.
This isn't a super clear that, we wanna change like supply other SO. I have no idea what SO means. Like,
It's
forgive
just what
me.
it's always
maybe
been.
that's gonna go on, it's what it's always been, but we wanna call it supplies custodial. Just so it's, so we know what it is, it increases the usability of the budget forms, the transparency.
Will you go back up to our transportation and our maintenance sections? Our maintenance section for coal, we budgeted 100,000. We spent 80,000. I did rename that fund code. It is now coal.
Wild.
Imagine that.
Now says coal.
Let's see, where was it at? It was,
It's up on 100. So
there's
if
our
you'll scroll down probably to page 5.
batteries column. Oh, I know this one.
There we go.
It's-
It's right there.
It's right here.
Oh, let's see, oh, there it is.
So we have our heat is our coal. We spent 81,000. I'm still gonna budget high, 95,000, just because I don't know what the weather's gonna do and how much we're gonna need to burn.
Yeah.
But to me, that's really encouraging because we were over 100,000 2 years ago.
We were budgeting over 100,000
No, we were spending over 100,000 2
on
years
the,
ago.
2 years ago.
Yes. As well as if you go down into transportation,
That you're close. on
yep,
this
it's the
one.
next page. Our fuel, our bus fuel, we had budgeted 100,000 last year, came in at 70. We're gonna still budget at 90 because we don't know what the costs are gonna do. But those are two of our biggest ticket items that we spend each year, and I'm encouraged that we've been able to get those prices down.
So like detailed reports of every single thing and everything that's spent, all of that's trackable, and that's what the auditors come in and they review, look at.
Well,
look at
and
things like
as
that.
we build our budget, I'll go to this and I'll look up this line item and go, okay, what was purchased out of there? Should it have been purchased out of there? Is there another fund it can be purchased out of next year? And so as we're doing that, one, we're finding errors in some of our practices so that we can correct them. But we're also finding, okay, is this an expense that's going to happen next year? You know, our well repair out here, it's gonna happen next year.
Better know.
Right. But some of those things, and that's kind of the process that we follow. Other good news with our budget is our workman's comp dropped again. 3 years ago, we were spending $90,000 on our workman's comp coverage. This year, we're at 27,000. Because,
Don't have any claims.
I don't have claims because our employees are being safe. They're using the safety equipment we get for them. And as such, we're not having huge claims, which is allowing us to save a huge chunk of money there.
So, we're just returning back to plant facility, Tyson, did that help answer your question on the,
Mhm.
on the plan? I think, we look at that amount, some of the other things that we're looking at for like but the coming forward. Like we're looking at like the revenue, the 300,000 that comes in for plant facility. Then the transfers in would be coming from, that's the investment portions, right? Like the.
Yes,
Like when we.
so that $75,000 is from our school modernization funds. If you scroll down to
The
436,
The interest
correct,
earned.
the interest earned,
on-
yes, sorry.
Which is okay,
Will you
because,
scroll down to 436?
yeah,
One more. So So this is our modernization funds.
So, yeah,
We got our first set of money in December. And that would be higher if I hadn't moved 1.7 to our CD. But this year alone on our 1 million-ish is about 16,000 already. And all of that earnings on investment,
we're putting back into,
we're putting back into our plant facility because those funds, the interest can be used on what we want. It's not, doesn't have the same strings attached. And so it'd be really nice if the interest on that covers our custodial supplies and exceed.
so. Carrie this is a new one that we built, and for whatever reason, it wasn't calculating the bottom part, but as we run these numbers here. We've already spent 17,000 on water fountains that have been put in throughout the whole entire
We were
district.
able to do that district wide
And
and
so
allowed it to be.
So when we look at that, we'll have, okay, so there's 17 for that. We're looking at approximately, I don't know,
750,
what's that?
750. So
Yeah, for those
we're
three.
estimating maybe 300,000 for our
We
changing
got, but we
rooms.
don't, yeah, so the changing rooms at the high school should cost. We're still trying to figure that out. So we just put a little bit of money over there. We know the lift and level's gonna cost us, we've already approved that portion. And then we put a little bit of extra in there for overlays, if that's what the board chooses to do. Again, this is a budget. Board doesn't approve it, then it just
We
carries
adjust it.
over. And then for roofing projects for this next year, we put another 200,000 in. Might not be that high, but again, it's a budget, so whatever's left, so at a worst case scenario, when we look at that, and we have to have the credit of 75 estimated from interest has to also be shown as an expenditure, that's why we have that in there twice, so the earnings on investment, we're anticipating 75,000. That has to also go here. That's where it pushes it back up to.
So the estimate for that is to end the year with 1.9 million in our modernization funds.
Now, so
What's your question?
Dennis, from what are you talking about? So just on these budget sheets, when you're looking at it, so we're seeing it as a credit here.
Right.
Because this is what it's going to, what that CD at the Bank of Commerce is projected to make over that time. But it's not going to stay in as a credit, so we have to actually zero that out. So it's also shown as an expenditure because we're transferring it to plant facility right here. And so it shows up as a credit in plant facility now. And that way it just helps us track where it
We
goes.
go back down to 436 for a minute.
So go ahead and, so the
So-
carryover at the end of next fiscal year for this.
Is 1.9 million, but what I wanted to show is we do have we have the 2.7 million still in here, but I'm only showing the carryover of this amount minus this and this amount.
Those two. So,
Because I have my CD separate, because I need to keep it separate, because it's in a separate. So our carryover is actually the 1.09 and the 1.7. There is mother.
Cause we're looking at the two years, what, the amended budget, the proposed budget, again, the highlights of the amended budget. We have that finalized number from last year's audit, that was our starting point. The trend is that we're gonna have about $800,000 carry over for at least this year, next year,
Our worst case scenario.
on a worst case scenario. Other questions as we're looking through that, because again, it's just like, this is just the budget hearing, and we're just talking about the 2 years, and then when we move to our regular meeting, we'll vote on those. I do wanna highlight, and I don't need to go exactly to the portions, but when we get into the salaries and the salary schedules and everything else that are on these, those are those are really close. Like, those are the things that when we look at, the budget where that's a majority of our expenditures are on the personnel. That was one of the pieces of advice when I started looking into being a superintendent, taking the different courses. And like the biggest piece of advice is make sure that you manage the expenditures and everything on personnel, like very, very tight. And I felt like we've done that in this district, since I've been superintendent. Making sure that we are not exceeding our FTEs for teachers. We're very careful about where we assign those, and so that allows us to live in our means when it comes to that funding that comes from the state that are earmarked for benefits and salaries. And so that's one of the reasons why I feel like it's been really good where we're at. Now, the extra money that's come in over the years that we've been able to use for facilities, that goes up and down and changes, and that can sometimes give people the perception of, oh, wow, look at all this spending that they're doing. That stuff, we're still living within our means, but we have to spend when it's here, and when it's not, we cut back. But I feel very good about the effort that we put on as a team here at the district office to look at those numbers that are in this budget.
So you think that the 3,240,000 will cover raises?
Yes, it does.
Yes,
Everything that we are proposing on the salary schedule, on the increases, the contracts, that stuff we have gone through for the last 2 months on a fine tooth comb. Like looking at on those. With some of these other things, because of the moving pieces, sometimes and it also with a budget, you're looking at it and saying, hey, you're not very accurate on this. How do we really know you're being accurate on that one? Those are the ones that we have really looked at. You had something.
One thing that we do is, we have 2 teacher positions that we don't have filled right now. And so when I am putting my information into the state forms that tell me how much money I'm going to get, I'm putting those 2 teachers as an R1 that I will get that. So the state estimates really low for me regarding those 2 teachers. If those 2 teachers come in and they're higher on the career rung, then that increases my revenue.
And the state allocates more.
The state gives us more, but I do estimate as if I'm going to have a first year teacher, so that I am estimating to have lower revenue.
What do you want, higher?
I do want my revenues higher, but when I'm building my budget, my revenues, I have to estimate low. And my expenditures, I have to estimate high, because I'm giving you guys the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And so I put in, like, we've gone through our staffing so many times. Okay, we have this many, because I have to put in, I have this many R1 teachers, this one, every single rung. And then it generates what our average salary is and what the allocation will be per FTE. But in order to do that at the most accurate level is I have to assume that those 2 teachers are going to be R1s, which will drop my allocation per FTE. And so that's why we do it that way.
Other things that could improve it when we put into the formulas for estimating salaries and benefits as FTEs, what will come through is our attendance. And so we estimated a little bit lower than what we've been coming in, just to also make sure that it's close. Well, that we're safe. So those are things that, and I'll say it again, like I say every year, if it was just funded on enrollment, we would have a lot easier way of doing this, but it just.
So we guess
That's just the way it was.
a higher absentee which will give us a lower support units and a lower FTE.
But then when it comes in
But then when it
February,
comes in February, it should come in
it should
higher
come-
than what we're
because
getting.
because we're looking at worst case scenario.
Right. We're not,
We're budgeting at worst case scenario, but it should come in. But this has probably been the best questions we've had in 6 years with this discussion.
We're learning.
I don't know, but we're all learning.
I think all of us are. I told Shane last week, I'm like, I'm understanding what I'm doing.
That's scary.
That's good.
Like I'm making connections that I haven't before. And when I started this, I was told it'll take you 3 years to feel like you understand the job and that you understand you know nothing about the job. And this process has shown me that after 3 years, I'm like, oh, I'm making those connections, which is really exciting.
So I never could understand why we didn't show on our revenues the capital outlay or the money that comes in, like the 2 million. something.
Okay,
To show
so
that we actually-
on that front
that we
page,
actually have.
So which one should I go to which one should I go to?
so just it doesn't matter which one.
The proposed.
Sure. So when you look at my fund numbers, at the beginning, you have 100.
Yeah.
And this is my M&O funds that I get from the state. All those other funds do not come from the state. M&O funds, I pretty much can spend how we see fit. All of those other funds are shown on the
That's
right side of the budget.
just like this, the summary,
Right.
right?
So that's shown over there because all of those funds have strings attached to them.
You have your Title I, your special ed.
Our plant facility, our school
facility.
modernization,
Those are all.
and that, in this far side, Nedra, I also have my Hamer City grant. Because that can only be spent in that one way.
Right.
And so this front page, that front page only shows my state revenue.
Yeah, it just never, there's never a picture of the total, what we have
Right,
anywhere.
I know.
See that, but it's never there, but. So we don't really know how much the whole.
So if you go back
budget
to
is
the
worth.
2-year, Shane.
Well, you can kind of look at that if you add.
So if
the
I
actual-
add my proposed here, the 7.9 and my 4.9,
That's what you're
that's,
gonna.
so my 8 and my 5, that's how much revenue is expected to come in next year. And then when I look at my expenditures, I have those combined. However, it doesn't just show my expenditures on here. And this is a spreadsheet the state creates, so I don't get to have it how I want it necessarily. So it's this number minus that number is my expenditures. This number minus this number. And so that's my expenditures, but my unappropriated balance would be the 716 and the 1.5, which is my carryover overall.
And when you look at this other side over here, we're not always looking for a carryover on this side. One of the reasons why it's saying 1.5 is because that's what's gonna be left in the school modernization.
We have school
fund.
modernization and we have plant.
But like all the special ed funds, the Title I funds that come in, we're trying to allocate every dollar every single year.
The expectation is that we spend that money on this year's
You don't wanna
students.
carry that over.
Yeah.
But if we wouldn't have had, and I'd have to go, once we get this cleaned up, I do have like a 20-year one. It's gonna be accurate as budgets are accurate.
Yeah.
But it will show that, you'll see that when we pass a bond at the district level, the stuff over on this right-hand side goes up because it gives us 4 or 5 years to work with money, to work on projects. Or we don't have to do a bond now because we have the school modernization. We don't-
But
we don't do
because
there.
bonds fallen off, school modernization has come, it looks like it's staying pretty steady.
That's what on that book.
I forgot about this, that's, yeah, that's good.
Does that help?
But we feel real good about everything that we'll see in the regular meeting comes to the salaries and benefits. And it has been a good year for that, with, we didn't get our discretionary money increase, but they did increase a certain amount for teachers. And we'll hear later, I don't wanna spoil it, cause.
You gotta sit on pins and needles waiting
Yeah.
for this.
Well, it's right.
You got the hangover after the, it was at home going, I can't wait to see. But it was good for our teachers and in many ways. Round 3.
I think your attachments are probably just down in the
So-
board meeting.
I just put it down there.
Yeah.
If it's okay, I was just gonna pull up the action item from the fee hearing with the information. I just didn't wanna put it in 2 spots. So even though I'm gonna go down to action item, this is still in the hearing, it's not an action item. There's 3 areas that as we talk to our different departments that want to be looked at. The first one is driver's education. Right now, we are charging $150 per student to take that. Would like to increase that by $50 to cover increasing fuel maintenance costs. And also, a lot of other areas are quite a bit more. The private stuff is quite a bit more. So $200 is still a great deal for the kids to take that. But if without, we need to, we wouldn't be, we're not trying to like make a lot of money on this, we're just trying to cover our costs. And by keeping it at 150, we would start to lose money. That's the first one. The second one is, as I visited with the athletic department, we do have a proposal to change some of the gate admission amounts and processes that we've done in the past. So the highlighted ones are the ones that are going to change, everything else stays the same. So we would like to adjust the rates to include an amount for senior citizens, 65 and over for single game admission and season passes. Also to clarify the children's entrance amount as PK5, which is at 4 years old. They can walk around, they should be probably paying to get into the games.
And right now, they're not.
Right now, they're not. Right now, I think it was 5-year-olds. 4-year-olds haven't been paying to get in. And so the reasons for this, the rationale is we do have increasing costs of officials and their travel fees, and just to be able to receive revenue from patrons of other teams. So what happens is we miss out really from other senior citizens from other teams. And I'm not trying to like make a ton of money on them, but if you have 10 grandmas and grandpas from somebody else's team coming, that could pay for one official on one night. And so we're missing out. When we've done this in the past, we put senior citizens, I think the initial thing was like, oh, we want people in our community. But as soon as we put it there, it was all the others. So we've also said, well, we don't want to make it really hard for our senior citizens to come. I don't see a lot of senior citizens who don't have grandparents or kids, or who haven't always been a supporter of the schools. So we would like to have the senior citizen individual pass to be $40 for the entire year for our rent down. So it's, even if one of ours, so I'm gonna talk about my mom and dad. They are in this area just barely. My mom is barely squeaked into that. But this would pay for a JV game official, well, kind of, almost pay for one official for the year, but then they're getting in for the entire time. But if we don't wanna have to like make her pay $5, but if we're missing out on some of the others, it really does make a difference. The cost for officials over this last year was approximately $24,000 to $25,000 for all sports all year long.
How much?
25,000.
I wish there was a way to not charge our senior citizens just for this.
Can't you put like visiting seniors?
That makes it really difficult for our ticket takers. Because our ticket takers get put into a hard spot.
If I was a
But
ticket taker, I wouldn't know the difference on a lot of people.
So we don't charge anything now, right?
Right.
And we're now going to charge,
We did 10 to 15 years ago.
yeah, I know, I remember when we changed that, but,
I get that it sounds like a slap in the face. I get, but I'm also thinking that we're trying to keep it reasonable for our people. But
And to be
I-
consistent across our district.
because here's the other thing, it's like, we could be nice at this, but when you go to North Fremont or Ryrie, you're paying. So why does North Fremont and Ryrie get to pay for the refs, but we don't?
so how much do you think we came up short?
I don't know about
We're not
short.
short yet.
It's not short, I just think it's like. It's not short. It's just, if you're paying it for one thing, you can't use it for other things. That's all I'm saying. Could we survive without this? Yeah, I guess we could. And there's no promise, like, everything just costs money. That's the hard part. I wish I could say here, say, all of our extracurriculars, we're gonna keep our pay to play low. This is one way to keep the pay to play low. Is at least is the idea behind it.
That's the other option, is to increase that.
We could, but if we increase pay to play, then we have that, it's just everything costs money somewhere.
I'm worried about seniors that have been coming,
Maybe,
and now when they show up, they're gonna get charged.
I might.
If they were to go to another school, they would pay it regardless.
I know it's every little bit counts. The ones that always come are going to keep coming, and they're gonna keep giving. I don't see,
What's the age of a senior?
we said 65 on this, but we could change the age to whatever you guys wanted it to be.
Oh, there it is.
At least this, in this proposal, in our committee, we talked about 65, but if anything on this, if the board would like to, when we get it into an action item, you're welcome to change it, you can cross stuff off. This is just what the proposal is.
65 is good. I just hate to go back to charging them. I've heard so many, people say how wonderful it is.
Guess we could say, we're not charging you, but here is a donation thing to help pay for reps.
Well, but I would have no problem buying a senior pass for my parents if they were to come. Like that to me would be worth it to have my parents come watch their kids kind of thing. And I could see that happening with a lot of families where come and I'll get you a pass.
Well, and I guess if you wanted to, if we only wanted to like make the other senior citizens, we could say it. This doesn't help with the money, but it helps with the sentiment of keeping it free. They just have to come get a senior individuals, West Jefferson senior individual pass. And then we give it for free.
So
Like that's an option. And I don't know, cause I look at that and say, okay, how much are we really gonna make? If there's 100, well, how many senior citizens individual? How many senior citizens would there be? That would come to a game from West Jefferson. It'd have to be, and so do we count the grandmas and grandpas that live outside of the district, or do they just have to like come and get a family pat, like a? You see where I'm going? That's where it gets complicated.
It's a lot of goodwill.
that you just can't change that. I think seniors and say, I don't know what we wanna do, but if they're in district, live in our community,
or they're connected to, or even if they're a grandparent of a student who's playing.
Stop in.
Come into the office.
And we put which student, which. I could be okay with that if we leave the senior citizens 65 on there. And then we'd have the non-West Jefferson seniors.
So how would you get that out? Would you take it to the kids and say, hey, tell your grandparents,
Yeah,
if they wanna pass, they need to come down to school, get one for free.
or at
Or-
least call in and say, can I get this, and have the kids help take it to their
Well,
grandparents.
if they get put on the list, those passes actually go with the ticket takers. And so when that, so Nedra, you call in, you say, I want a senior citizen pass. Joanna writes Nedra Perkins on it. It goes into the ticket taker bag. When you pull into the parking lot,
I'm like.
they
that.
hand you your pass. I think this is a good idea.
Because the grandmas and grandpas are gonna probably give them $40 in their fundraisers anyway, and buy a donut card or something. So.
What more than that?
Do you think, again, since this is still just a hearing, it's all in discussion, do we? How do you guys feel about the PK to 5 being good on that,
It seems petty.
to make 4-year-olds pay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Everyone's running around.
They're not watching. They're just running.
I-
you have to bring them because they can't.
Try to parents an extra $5 for under.
Well, they would fall,
Because mine, but
they would fall under the family passes. Right, but if you're going to a movie, you're paying for it. If you're going to, it's actually down to 3-year-olds, they're not being carried. I actually hear what you're saying on the senior citizens pass, and I think I would be okay from my proposal, but again, it's gonna be the board's decision. I stand strongly behind this one.
How would you word instead of having $40, how would you word that?
I would say, family member of a West Jefferson student
Free.
or player, but family member, well, yeah, just come in and apply for it, because here's the thing is,
Apply at office.
apply at office or talk to an administrator.
And it could be a family member. I mean, we're not saying we're gonna give this to aunts and uncles.
No, it has to be a
No.
senior,
So
right?
it'd have to be
It has to be a
specific
senior,
grandparent.
Well, but
but it could be a senior uncle,
True.
and I would be okay with that.
yeah,
So family member 65 years old.
family or community members. Because there are community members that come and don't have kids.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that, like, if you were a West Jefferson fan, now,
West Jefferson Panther community.
we'd have to figure out that, but basically what we're gonna do is give them a pass, and it's gonna be for free.
for free with purchase of $10 a concession.
Yeah. Okay, but this has been a good discussion, and I think, again, the reason for bringing it up is paying for officials is $25,000. Like, that's the thing, and so even when we're looking at that, if we ever get into a situation, if there were 100 people that could buy an individual pass, that would lower it by $4,000. So again, it doesn't go away.
It's not a huge amount. I'm not worried about that. 25,000. That's scheme of thing.
The difference is there is no state funding that comes in for this revenue, like this activity
There
is
isn't.
is
but your
extracurricular,
gate is big, isn't it?
not always. The gate, if you had 50 senior citizens not show up for a game, was 50 times 7, Carrie, on your calculator over there? 35.
350.
Like, that would pay for all of the officials that night. So really, we are missing out. But if that's what the board would like to do, Because I don't know how to do it without them saying, well, you were nice to me before, but if you talk to them, they probably understand, hey, I can help pay for it. Some would, and some might say, well, I'm just not gonna come. But a lot of those that say that,
About if we put this instead of next to the senior citizen pass.
West Jefferson senior citizens are invited to apply for a free athletic pass, enjoy access to home athletic events at no costs. Something like that. But that's, I know we just came off of a budget where we were talking about millions and millions of dollars, but we know that there's funding that come from the source from the state. When it comes down to athletics, this could become an issue. Maybe we don't do it now, but it could.
I guess I'd like to see how much you lost. Like I said, yeah, how much do you come up with?
Well, the only estimate that we would have is if there were 100 senior citizens that attended games all year long. At least at the cost of, Carrie, your calculator ready?
Yes, sir.
So
Okay.
approximately 30 home events that we charge. That would be all football, all volleyball, basketball, and wrestling, approximately, maybe 35 max, but let's just say 30.
Okay.
So, but for one person, if one person was a senior citizen and you have $30 or 30 events times 5, we paid just, we only got-
$150.
that's $150 that they would have to pay to come to every single home event. And if there were 50 of those people that wanted to come to all,
7,500.
that's 7,500. So you're saying, well, what did you really lose? So let's estimate how many seniors came to every single game this last year. Then it's a ballpark.
I guess what I was asking was not how much you're losing with the seniors, how much did you lose last year in order to pay your
What was
dues
our
last
gain
year?
last
What
year?
was our gain? Or how much did we lose by letting them improve?
So
Not what we could possibly get, but how did we come out? Did we have to find extra money to pay the
not
referees?
yet, but this is a budget where I don't want, because we have to have equipment, and so we do have stuff that comes in through, a little bit through the activity cards of the kids. And then the people that do come in, and it builds up, but it also spends out really, really, really fast.
Yeah.
Did we do the hay fundraiser last year?
Hay fundraiser has been handed over to the Booster Club.
And if
So they do it, they won't.
they do it, yeah, the booster club, not revenue.
I don't
It's
think
not a
they
revenue
even do
source
that
for us.
anymore.
And so, like 5 years ago, it was a revenue source for us. We did the hay fundraiser, we would do all of that different things. Now, as a district, we haven't done that. And so this is really just a discussion to say, okay, are we hurting right this second? No. We're
Okay,
not.
so we came out fairly, okay.
So we came out okay.
Yeah.
But if we do start to have teams going to state again, like that's one of the reasons why this fund has actually grown a little bit, is because we've been awful. We haven't gone to state. Like seriously, because they're
Melding.
like you send a team to state, we're looking at least $8,000 in travel, not 10,000 per team going to state. And so we start getting successful again, like, which,
Don't wanna touch the pay to play fees.
and that's where it comes circles all the way back. And like,
Right there close is our seniors that I wanna protect something.
but if we start off maybe just by having something in place where we charge the other people's seniors, that might be a good place to start. And charging other people's 4-year-olds, because they also run around.
I have put this on as an alternate option on our action item, so I will update our action item before our meeting starts.
Thank you.
This has been a good hearing discussion.
I think let's try this year and see where we.
Well, we'll see what you guys propose when you get into the action items.
see where it ends up, but
Glenda, do you have
I
any
have
other
no
thoughts?
problem paying it, but how many people aren't gonna come because they have to pay? That's the thing, you know,
I don't know. though.
I've noticed since you went free on the seniors, we have a lot of older people coming to the games.
I don't want to be that ticket taker that's like,
Who
oh,
are
we
you?
changed it, just kidding.
I mean, realistic, if somebody came and couldn't afford it, would you let them in
Probably.
and not say, oh, you can't come if you can't?
I don't wanna answer that on live.
I mean, you know, come on, I would probably
A
pay
senior-
for
a
it to
senior-
get
a
in
senior
if they
citizen
couldn't.
probably, but again, we also have people who choose not to pay
Well, yeah,
and they sidestep our people.
Yeah.
And so we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, like on that.
Very well, though.
There's handfuls of them, yeah, that happen on football's an easier one for people to sidestep and want to pay. And so,
well, it makes it hard when you don't have, in the gym, where you don't have people at both doors too.
well, we can put signs there and remind people to come. There's different
But
things
football's
that-
a big one.
There's too many ways they could sneak into the field.
So, but again, we're doing fine right now. Like it's a balance. I like some of these ideas and these proposals. So, okay. Unless there's any other questions or comments, but I hear you, Glenna. You're right.
you
This
know?
wasn't, we knew that this proposal wouldn't be the easiest, be popular. But I think as we've talked through it, I think that would be at least the first step.
Was there one more fee hearing we had to talk about?
There is one more. It's on there. I just forgot to scroll down.
That's what I thought.
Last one on the fee hearing, just so we don't catch you guys off guard and everybody can. Lunch prices. So it's proposing that the elementary lunch prices go up by 10 cents from $3.15 to $3.25 per lunch. And secondary lunch prices at the 7th grade through 12th grade from up by 15 cents, $3.35 to kind of help cover inflation costs as they go up. The state sets the adult prices and they will be at $3.25 for breakfast and $5.10 for lunch. There's no negotiation on that, but the increases here would be the ones that would be voted on. Just as part of the fee hearing, I would like to just put a shout out to our lunch personnel and Mrs. Ward and her crew has done a great job. The lunches are fabulous. There's a lot of really good improvements. I know she's been really involved in different things at the state and even national level to work on ways to have flexibility in what they can serve. We've had a lot of restrictions that have been placed on us over the last 15 years in lunch services. But she's doing a great job of working towards that. Also, the food service program is applied to revisit the base year for provision to breakfast, and we've qualified for that, so all students will continue to have breakfast at no cost. So that's just a lot of hard work that Lisa's done, but when we get into the action item, those will be the places that the amounts we vote on.
Part of why we were able to maintain that status is because we've had our parents filling out the free and reduced applications. That's what gives us this status. And so we need to continue to encourage those parents to help us.
So each year, if you fill it out one year, you do have to reapply.
You have to reapply each year.
And pretty simple forms to fill out.
And any information on there actually doesn't go to anybody here in the district.
No, I know, I don't see it.
All Lisa gets is a list back of those who qualified.
It doesn't show her the exact.
Like we have no personal information that's shared with the district.
That covers fee hearing. Any discussion, questions? If not, the recording will stop now as we enter into executive session. And there will be a new live link that will be available for the regular board meeting at approximately.
10:30, well.
Sorry.
Let's watch it already.
Can we go ahead and just do our opening procedure for our executive session before we turn off the recording?
So we'll switch over to regular board meeting then. we'll call this meeting to order, and Mr. Williams, will you lead us in the pledge?
Oh,
I think
nope, you're skipped to 5. We're on 4.
I think misunderstood. She just wants you to do the open procedures and just make your roll call vote.
To enter executive session. Yes, please.
But I will do.
You
the
will
answer-
lead us in the
The
pledge.
answer is yes.
I apologize that I didn't catch that.
No, I don't know. All right, so the board will be open for a motion to move to executive session then.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I move that we move to executive session prior to code 74-2061.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Cottle?
Aye.
Mrs. Reedy? Mrs. Perkins? Mr. Birdshaw?
Aye.
We need to adjust our.